morning, everyone, and welcome to this session where we'll be discussing as a panel, innovation for success, empowering SMEs to boost businesses through technologies. I'm the moderator here today. I'm Elliott Denham from DTEC Ventures, and I'm head of the startup programs here in DTEC. Today, we'll be discussing SMEs both from a micro and macro perspective. We'll be exploring operational efficiencies of technology, customer journeys, conversion, user experiences, and much, much more. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce the first panelist, who refers to himself as a seeker of misfits, outliers, and doers. He's a global nomad and an avid futurist. A pleasure to introduce PK Gulati.
Thank you, Elliott. It's a pleasure being here at the MEED Summit. A topic which is, something very close to me. I work with startups and SMEs, and I see all the changes that have happened in the last few years and how they've been good and awesome, in my opinion, for startups, despite the fact of whatever anybody may say. And a lot of that has to do with technology. So I'll be happy to share what I think has happened in the last few months, especially, and how technology is making SMEs work more efficiently and deliver more.
A pleasure, PK. Great to have you on board. Looking forward to the discussion and your insights, particularly with your experience mentoring and coaching startups and SMEs. Next up, we have the managing director, or joining us, I should say, we have the managing director of Astound Commerce Middle East. He builds digital assets and e-commerce platforms for over 285 global brands. So really, what he doesn't know about digital assets is not worth knowing. He's activated over 1,000 digital commerce launches. A pleasure to introduce David O'Sullivan.
Thanks, Elliott. Just to say thanks very much for inviting me today. Really looking forward to discussion with yourself and PK. In terms of SMEs, I've certainly worked for my fair share over the last 20 years. And in that time, it's all been about looking at operational efficiencies and how technology can help with that. So looking to see what we can share that might be able to be helpful to people who are listening in.
Thank you, David. Gents, an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. Our session will be approximately 45 minutes, including active Q&A from the audience. So if you are listening in, please type in the comments section any questions or topics or thoughts or figures or facts that you may wish the panelists to comment or consider on. But we'll get straight started into a topic that David has already introduced, which is operational efficiency. So, David, you've been in this space for over 20 years, you mentioned, as we were backstage, and you've seen huge changes in what operational efficiency actually means. Can you give us an insight into that sort of vision of what you've seen over 20 years and how it's transitioned?
Sure. Well, I'll try my best. There's obviously hundreds of different examples, but each and every time we kind of engage in any business I've worked in with a new client that's looking to embrace digital or certainly those efficiencies that we've been talking about. The idea is that 20 years ago, what it was kind of taking people away from a paper format to kind of move that into technology that could help them to make bookings faster, to kind of interact with their clients more frequently. And I think for me, certainly one of the things that I've done in the last 10 years is look at entering into a business and seeing how as that digital agency that I've worked with, how we can actually make ourselves as operationally efficient as possible to service customers. And a large part of that is kind of setting up technology that can help us to understand our customers better. And if we can do that, then we can also then start sharing those thoughts and processes with our customers as well.
I mean, I guess it's really important to practice what you preach.
100%, yeah. So I think in the last 4 or 5 businesses that I've gone into, we've looked at sort of CRM systems and customer management initially. A large part of my background is account management and understanding how we can interact better with our customers. And if we can get some technology, I mean, other technologies are available. I've always looked at what's best in market. We use Salesforce quite often to kind of set up the CRM. And I've always kind of gone in to kind of really get a basis really for a platform and utilize technology to kind of help us understand who our customers are, and then manage those journeys with them.
And PK, are there any particular softwares or operational efficiency based tools that you've come across in your times working with SMEs?
Well, the list is endless, but one of the biggest changes in the way things work today is the amount of visibility we have in different aspects of business. And that is where software has clearly changed everything. Like if you took an example of e-commerce, and the metric you'd use a few years ago was how many packages were delivered and how many were not delivered. Today, you can tell them how many packages were delivered, how many were delivered late, and how many were not delivered because the address wasn't right, and how many were not delivered because the courier was over, taking more packages than they could, or whatever from that, So the depth of knowledge that we have today, or the depth of granularity that we have today in any kind of a process, and that visibility is one of the biggest gains people have had, which has helped them make processes more efficient. If you go down there, we see dashboards of all kinds. We find softwares which do stuff which we never thought was possible, for example. So all that stuff coming in, all these different kinds of technologies kind of merging together in terms of one, measuring it, second, visualizing it, and third, providing a solution to it so that you could actually solve the problems has come down from the largest corporations to be available to smaller corporations, to SMEs. Like a two-man company today has availability of almost every kind of software or tool that a large corporation would have a few years ago. And that, in my opinion, has completely changed the ground rules.
At a thousandth of the cost, if I may add as well. But when is enough then, PK, or David as well? When is enough with regards to understanding or tracking the analytics? You mentioned dashboards. You could have one dashboard. You could have 1,000 dashboards. When is enough? And at what point does it become too much to have too many analytics, where perhaps it becomes a distraction?
From my point of view, we're kind of going through a bit of a data revolution at the moment. There's kind of, everything that people are looking to understand, every client that I speak to at the moment. As PK mentioned, from an e-commerce point of view, you can't really get enough data about who your customers are, what they're doing. We can obviously, we're in a position where we can kind of help manage and understand or make sense of that data. But really, as if we take the Middle East as a focus point, we are in a position. There are businesses here that have access, as you say. They might not know necessarily what they need to do with all these different systems, but if we're able to cut through some of that, make recommendation, help to kind of make sense of the analytics and data that they get, it feeds back again into if operational efficiency is what somebody is looking for, and the outcome of that is that they make better end to end, more sales, or whatever it might be, then we are there to kind of help put them in a position where they can make sense of that data and iron that out for them.
So almost teaching a man to fish, setting them up, and then off they go, and potentially removing the stabilizers once things are in motion.
Certainly, if that's a possibility, then yes. But we for small businesses, for very large businesses, having the expertise alongside them for the long term is really something that we rely on as a business. We're in a position where we can continue to make those efficiencies for them. We can continue to analyze that data. Because if you are a smaller enterprise, you might not have the means to bring on the right kind of staffing to kind of go through that technology, or be in a bit of a minefield of bringing people on board who aren't going to be able to do that for you. So really, we want to kind of be there for the start of the journey, and also continue along that journey and build that relationship with the customer. And then we're accountable for that. So you're in a position where you're always going to be looking to report on those analytical pieces, or come up with more recommendation on how you can make further efficiencies in the future.
And PK, what about you? When is enough? What do you believe?
Well, there are three types of things. Like, one is essential, one is desirable, one is a distraction. So, and all of us choose different things at different times, depending on what we like. If you're a geek, you probably may go towards the distraction end. But coming on a more practical level, I personally believe that, the two things that have changed the ground rules again for people is one is the availability of tools and services in the SaaS format, like a software as a service, which is a subscription format, which brings the cost down and which also allows people to pay for what they use. So that differentiation has made people being able to kind of access, afford, and use tools to make their lives better. Also, the second thing that has happened, and you can see that revolution happening in the UAE at this point of time, is the gig economy freelancing kind of revolution, where you see more and more people and what David was mentioning, to the right kind of people being available to organizations which are smaller for project basis or for doing efficient world-class delivery of services. Now, with that in mind, I think people are actually going through a very large amount of SMEs, especially experimentation of trying tools out without having to commit to one and kind of invest too much into it. So I think it is a pretty good time to be in the sense of being able to actually see how these small tools are making big differences.
So how then, when there's so much out there, can an SME, and we'll get on to the definition of an SME that we spoke about yesterday a little bit later, how can an SME choose? I mean, there's so much out there. Like you're saying that the time and the tools and availability of resource and automations has never been higher. How can they choose? How can they not get choice paradox such that they can actually implement quickly and make impact, rather than perhaps being confused with choice paradox from all of the options that are out there? And once they choose something today, then tomorrow or next week it's perhaps outdated.
Yeah, it's definitely I'd say a challenge in the industry, and even someone like Astound, who we're a large global business, and I'd say we're outside of the definition of SME, although not in region. We're a small focus point here. Really, we're growing as part of the overall business, but we have that challenge as well. It's great. A new technology comes along and everyone wants to jump on board with it and see how you can implement that in a business. But I do think that there is certainly a lot that are kind of rising to the top. You need to have an understanding of what are the right tools for you and how they link together as well. So if there are different parts of your business that require a technology to solve a solution, whether that's internally communicating with your teams or is something that needs to reach out to your customers, you need to be in a position where you can kind of understand how those link together. And as PK has mentioned around, software as a service, there are a lot of great partnerships out there that you can kind of interact with one technology that seamlessly can kind of link in with another. And that's the sort of thing you need to kind of think about and look at if you have a more forward-reaching kind of strategy for building your business, I'd say.
And one of the other things, Elliott, in this space is that, SMEs talk to each other. The internet has made it possible for people to actually interact with each other and find best practices across borders. So I see a lot of people actually do a lot of learning from similar groups, similar, platforms and associations. Like I see a lot of VCs, for example, that's a space I work in, actually have a very large focus on sharing these best practices with their teams or teams they invest in. So you see a lot of stuff which is available. So if you go to, for example, Andreessen Horowitz's website, you'll not only find a very large number of things that they have done with different companies, but kind of arrangement that they have with tools. For example, I know of people here who run groups, for example, where they actually give you, try this tool out. You get a 2-month, 3-month free. Try this out. Use this. So they've done deals with them. Those kind of things are available. And today, I agree that it's a minefield in the sense of who to pick up and what to pick up. But there's also at the same time a lot of resources available which allow you to actually find solutions put together or mashed up with different kinds of tools which actually provide you a solution to a particular problem. So if you want to do, for example, let's say a press conference or a press outing, you can actually go to different places where you place this and they will actually throw your press release out to a very large number of outlets. Or on the other hand, you want to, for example, do, say, an event. So you want to invite people, you want to send out an invitation and people want to register, confirmations need to go out, all that stuff. A lot of it is now being automated. So all those things happen. Our calendars, for example, just Calendly makes my life hell of a lot easier, where I'm able to, for example, get somebody to actually define a time when we'll have a meeting without having an assistant having to go up and down trying to fix that. All those things, though small, make a very big difference in the day of an entrepreneur or an SME owner. So it makes it far more efficient. And all these small 5 minutes, 10 minutes gains that they pick up, end of the day, provide them productive time for doing something else.
So far, we've been talking about operational efficiencies with the currency inferred being time. David, how can the currency inferred be dollars? In that, how can SMEs potentially monetize some of that data that they have, that they continue to pick up? And whilst it may not be the core of their business, their core business may be selling furniture, let's say, once they collate all of that data in their CRM and they've got a good user experience that we'll get onto in a second, how can they potentially monetize that data as another channel of revenue?
If you're talking about monetizing data, I mean, let's say data as you kind of pull it into any kind of area is only as good maybe as the journey that you've kind of set up or the questions that you've asked in the first place. Okay. So you need to make sure that everything is set out correctly, is kind of set up to kind of give you the information that you need back. And once you've kind of got answers to those, then you're kind of in a place where you can then look at efficiencies or monetizing it, as you've mentioned. For me, when we look at our clients and the data that we can kind of receive, particularly around a customer journey, it's extremely important for us to understand who your customer is, where they're coming from, what they like. We look at efficiencies within that data. And if you can provide a more seamless journey, an end-to-end customer experience, which has been a positive one, then that's where you will see an uptick in good kind of revenue kind of popping up, where you've actually managed to fulfill something. And I just one of the things that makes me think of at the moment is I mentioned before this. I had a daughter 6 weeks ago. So a lot of time at the moment. Thank you very much. A lot of time at the moment spending on First Cry website. It's not something that I've come across before. It's not something that I've utilized or worked with. It's not a client of Astound's. But one of the things that they do very well is they know who their customers are. They take the information on that. And what they've figured out as well is how to do the last mile extremely efficiently. I'd love to actually meet with them because I can order something and it will be on my door sometimes within 2 to 3 hours, which in the Middle East and in Dubai is incredible. And 5 years ago when I came here, if anything turned up, it was sometimes a bit of a challenge, and that particularly with that last mile. But they seem to, as a company, understand who I am, what I need, and they also know that I need it really fast. In that sort of situation, if it's something that you need for a new child, say, then I don't need to wait 10 weeks for it. I need it today. So that they understand their customers, and they must be utilizing data very well.
And if I could add, Elliott, on this, a very good example, David, First Cry, they actually made a place for themselves by actually having very good response to data that they were collecting. And I think one of the things that SMEs need to realize is to have a data strategy. A lot of the SMEs, when they start or when they begin, or in fact, too far into their life cycle, do not collect data efficiently or don't know which data to collect. So many times data is simple to collect when you start and you build that kind of framework so it gets collected. Even if you don't use it immediately, you have something to play on. I think this whole thing about having data scientists and data kind of people as a part of the designing effort of the SME business is a very important thing. And I would say that people actually put this as one of the things to do. When you're thinking of other core things while you're building a business, you should actually look at what you're collecting. Remember, data is important irrespective of what business you are in. A good example of that is a restaurant where they know what you eat regularly. So you come in there, they know you come in, and they would put your favorite drink on the table before you even ask for it. Those delightful things that we talk about is actually data, the system remembering that who you are, what you like, and things like that in a simplest form. And this has gone on from the time when there was no place to keep data. It was kept here. The owner, the person who served you remembered all that. Now, if you look at it from that perspective, any business creates data, and all businesses should make the effort of owning their own data. And to own your data, you need to first measure it, record it, and keep it in a way so it's usable in the future. With that in mind, I would say this is one of the biggest requirements that people should do now that we've all realized data is going to be the new oil and it's going to be the new asset that you are creating. And if you're not collecting it nicely enough, you're leaving something on the table.
Very valid, particularly that any business, no matter how traditional or not, or how technology focused or not, ought to have a data strategy that is clear and relevant to ultimately the founders to then apply, or the management to then apply operational efficiencies. But both of you touched upon customer journeys. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So customer journeys in the instance of a restaurant PK is offline. It's the waiter, he or she remembering your order, remembering your name. It's the manager welcoming you personally, etc. But of course, a lot of businesses have a hybrid customer journey between on and offline. That same restaurant may well have a profile on Talabat or on Deliveroo. It may have its own website. It may have its own social profiles. Can you give us some of your experience, some of your insights into some of the best hybrid customer journeys between on and offline, and how technology has helped enable that?
Maybe if I kind of start, we've actually Astound have just built and created a website for Elliott, who are Middle East Lebanese-based luxury fashion designers. When we started having the conversation with Elliott, we were in a situation where they chose us as an agency, and then a lot of the conversation that kind of started up within that is to say that what they wanted to do was create an online experience which could have a flavor of what is in store. And straight away they were already, maybe not with even knowing it's their first kind of real dip into e-commerce online and a kind of digital transformation strategy. But they understood that they need to have that experience and that journey for their customers on a electronic basis is the same as somebody walking into an Elliott store. Yeah. What we also need to do within that is understand, capture the data and the information of those customers that are coming through so that they have that seamless experience. And if that runs then through to delivery, if that runs through to them maybe collecting in store or something like that, we want the entire process for that to be seamless for them. So again, it does pull back on what we've been talking about in terms of data, but really we've kind of put in something that we can kind of make measures across that to understand people, understand who it is that's coming to the site, collect information about those important customers, and kind of run that through to experience that they want to come back. And the real important thing I feel for me is, which I think a lot of businesses I've seen shy away from in the past, is positive and negative reviews. Separate to Elliott, what I'm talking about in terms of people who are coming into a website who have a good experience, might tell one or two people about it. People who tell have a bad experience will tell everybody about it.
Okay.
So you really need to kind of ensure that end-to-end customer experience is good, and that's every step. Whether they walk into your store, whether they are on your site 3 times a day, you need to understand who that person is, and you need to understand, what their likes are. I want to jump on another example, but
please,
before I have
please.
But I've worked with Emirates, Donata, and in particular Mahaba for the last sort of 5 years here in region, and in any guys that I've worked with them, and we've been in a position where we've always been looking to optimize their customer journey. They know it's important. It's been extremely important over the last few years within COVID to kind of get a customer who is looking to get through that airport in the quickest time possible, to be in a position to understand who that customer is, ensure they get the right level of service, and that has to interact in the physical world as well. So that is a physical service of being picked up at the right time as a customer who's booking their mother to come through the airport and arrive safely. You want to ensure you're in safe hands, and you want to see that end-to-end customer service journey working. So it works well from a booking standpoint, but it has to operate in the real world. And again, come back to what I was mentioning about reviews, because they will tell people about it, and if it's a good experience, they'll tell everybody. They'll tell a few people, and it'll be something that they will also use again and again.
And PK, what about you? Are there any use cases where you've seen stupendous or excellent customer journeys, or indeed, to David's point, not so good, and they're the ones that you tell your friends and family about as well?
I think one of the biggest differences that I've seen in customer journeys while they move from physical to digital, or a hybrid in between, was how easy it has become to measure them, for people to actually comment on them. So I do see a lot of people actually feel afraid of comments. I think comments are your best, they're the best inputs that you can get. People telling you, they obviously feel loyal to you to actually be able to tell you something which is not going right. So I personally believe that's something very efficient. What I've actually seen is that people are spending more time on those customer journeys than they used to before, because the feedback loop has happened. And to give you an example, people are also now starting to be real. They actually think like themselves and people rather than customers. So people actually, when you do, so one of the biggest things, and Noon, for example, I know the Noon CEO well. Every time I meet him, he actually uses me for feedback. Say, hey, we're doing something new. Have a look at this. Try this out. What do you feel about that? Now, that is the amount of hustle that is being done by some of the people, which makes me proud, which makes me, conscious of the fact that all of this is a constant process. And the other thing which I also see is people have started realizing, when they think as a customer, they realize what is the best method of communicating with them. So one of the things that I've started seeing is a lot of people are now using messaging apps like WhatsApp, for example, to communicate back with you, to keep you updated, rather than forcing you, for example, to go to email and check what we have told you, or go to this app to do that. People have realized that people like ease. When you keep them updated, they actually love you. So what I've found is, like, for example, Emirates is a good example, which keeps me updated. Like, I use the Skywards app, for example. The travel has been a bit less in the last few months, as you all know. But before that, I can tell you, and now even when travel wasn't happening, they were telling me things all the time. They're keeping communicating with me. They tell me which belt my luggage is coming on. My bags have actually been put on the plane. All this updation and this kind of, the granularity of the journey has changed, and that makes the difference.
And we're actually seeing, I think, going back to the very formal point about availability of tools, we're actually seeing so many sort of best practices that were once only available or accessible to big conglomerates being made available to 1-2-man bands. And to your point, PK, around experiencing the product, the service, here at DTEC Ventures, and we also have an active portfolio as well, the best way for us to gauge the potential of a business is to experience it as a customer, to go on a booking platform and book that hotel, or indeed to go on the experience or to buy something through them or experience that service. But I think what I got from your point there was that it's you've got to hustle. It's never enough to settle, because competitors, large or small, will always be at your heels, snapping away, implementing better technologies, more fluid, more streamlined customer journeys, and ultimately eating away at your cake. So in that case, then how do you think that okay, how do I get at this? We talked about online and offline sort of customer journeys and how they're going to be hybrid. You gave a great example, David, of Marhaba and Emirates, where you're booking online but actually experiencing in a COVID-safe way the airport, the airplane. How do you think augmented reality and or virtual reality as a consumer-based technology, or indeed from a business-to-business standpoint, will change the behaviors, change the way that businesses, notably SMEs, can and or will engage with their customers, and when?
You forgot the word metaverse, Elliott, there.
Do you want to take that one first, PK?
Well, I think, the AR, VR, and other presence technologies have exceptional promise. The only thing has been that their uptake has been limited because they need special devices and special stuff. But things are changing drastically. To give you an example, AR is an experience which was individual. So everybody had his own experience. So if you went somewhere and did the same experience, all of us would have separate devices to see separate experiences. But when you saw the launch or the opening of Expo 2020, we all had a combined AR experience, which was exceptional. And it was world's first, but that shows the shape of things to come. So I think that this is something which will have drastic implications of how people experience, for example, retail, or experience, I don't know another word, experiential experiences. So when you look at, for example, the way people are now, kind of trying things out, these things will make a very big difference. And I see that already. I don't know if you've seen the experiences like the on the top at Burj Khalifa, for example, the kind of experiences which are a mix of games, AR, VR, and basically being there without being there kind of experiences. Those experiences are changing how people feel about it. Now, we believe that these things will flow down and come to SME level, where individual SMEs will be able to make impactful stuff. The jury will probably stay out for a while before it will become price point competitive for people to do that. But I think it's happening so fast that I think that curve will be in the favor of SMEs far sooner than we think.
I'd agree as well with what you're saying from how that filters down and how people can utilize it. It's I think VR particularly is one of those things that we try to gamify experiences, or be in a position where we can kind of try and interact with people in a unique way. Expo's a wonderful example. If you visit the different pavilions there, there's some really great utilization of how virtual can work in this world. What I kind of see much more from a useful standpoint, going along the lines of different technologies, is artificial intelligence. And coming out the back of some of the conversations that we're talking about, real world understanding of how you can utilize AI. We have a partner with Salesforce, so when we're looking at e-commerce journeys and things like that, there's product Einstein, which is their AI offering. And we actually utilize that with our clients to make product offerings, product recommendations. So, that in the real world is us utilizing AI technology to ensure that customers are served what they're looking for, and certainly enhance the journeys that we've just been talking about previously. Virtual reality has its place. I'm just not sure I've got it's been around for a long time, and there's been a number of years of different people trying different things in market. If you can tell me what the best experience of that is, or how a company has managed to really monetize their way through something with VR. I don't have a great example.
What are you touched upon AI. What are your concerns over AI to SMEs potentially then, David?
I generally don't have too many concerns over artificial intelligence. I think utilized in the way that that pulls away from the science fiction side of things. We're in a position where we are utilizing and technology to either enhance the way that we do something or improve the journeys that we've got. And I think there will just be a natural utilization of AI, maybe with people not realizing too much what they're using, or actually there's an AI behind the tools and systems that they're using. What they will recognize is that they'll be in a situation where their customer journeys are changing, or they'll see data changing in a way, and that's again something they need to analyze and be in a position where perhaps an agency or something like that can help them to understand where that is coming from, or why those customer journeys might be changing.
And PK, any concerns that you see?
We could have a separate program on concerns of how AI algorithms can be weaponized and blah, blah, blah. But in the SME context, I personally don't see, and I agree with David, I think this will be AI in the case of SMEs and tools will probably serve the purpose of being making their processes only more efficient. They start learning more, they're getting more insights, and that makes their processes more efficient. I personally believe that most of the SMEs that we would probably end up working with will not be creators of AI, but be users of AI, in the sense that they will probably have data which will be used to possibly make a better decision for their customers or on behalf of their customers. So I don't think that is going to be directly responsible for any concerning behavior in that sense. Now, of course, things like privacy and things like how their data is handled, all these things are important. And SMEs, like everybody else, should be concerned and should be, kind of diligent with that. And I think for that, we do have things like GDPR and the standards which are required, how this data gets used. Now, if you want to be a purist, you could be like even having something like facial recognition to open a door or allowing you to come in, or recognizing the people walking through the door so that if there's somebody who's not recognized there, and raise an alarm for security purposes. In the purest sense, could be seen as overreach. But I think there will be a common or something like a practical line that most of the SMEs will not cross.
And yesterday when we spoke, PK, you made a very clear point that you don't think technology will replace people, rather it will multiply the value of people. Can you perhaps re-emphasize some of those points that you made yesterday on how technology can not only help with operational efficiencies, how AI can not necessarily help only with increasing revenues and things like that, but will allow people to be more valuable?
So usually when you talk about AI, SMEs and jobs in the same sentence, and people actually read it as AI will take my job kind of scenario, or technology in general will replace people. Now, it is something which we hear a lot of discourse about, but my personal thinking is, in a practical sense, AI will only, or technology in general, will make people more efficient. It will raise the profile and the level of the kind of work that we do. And of course, we've had such technological leapfrogs in the past, and that did not replace people. More people are still needed to actually make the world work. The world in fact, I think the world has more things to do. So we need more people to have better skills to do those more new things. So for example, a few years ago, a title like an AI expert or a data scientist or, a social media expert or, an influencer, these kind of titles did not exist. Where did all these people come from? They were doing some other jobs and actually converted themselves into that. So it's going to be reskilling. It will be upskilling. It'll also be a situation where new kinds of areas of works for SMEs will come up. So new SMEs will be created in completely brand new areas, which will need these people. So I personally believe that this is only positive rather than negative. Yes, some people who would be, at the point where the rubber hits the road, will get pink slips. Don't get me wrong, but they'll probably get upskilled and used in something else.
Wonderful. And I think it's a very valid time to mention that most of the services that we use from our devices already have some form of recommendation engine, some form of algorithm on the back end to streamline that process and ultimately increase our expenditure, let's say, increase our basket size. David, I just want to quickly go back to the point on Emirates. We had a question from one of the audience asking, is Emirates is Emirates engaging with their customer base, with their passengers via WhatsApp and or SMS? And if so, how can SMEs assess which platform on an SMS or WhatsApp basis is best to engage with?
Are they using WhatsApp for SMS messaging? Probably somewhere across the business, yes. It's a large organization. I don't deal with all of it, but it would be something that we would very much encourage. You and I and probably everybody here has experience at the moment of the power of WhatsApp. 5 years ago, coming from London, WhatsApp was something you used with your friends, but here in the Middle East, it's an everyday occurrence, and the business implications of WhatsApp here are astounding. The fact is, you are updated extremely well through an app, and literally anybody I talk to now, business or otherwise, will be able to get in contact with you directly, and you'll find yourself working with a business account. So yeah, if they're not using it, I would advise that they do. And bear in mind there are 70 odd different brands under the Emirates banner that they might be using it in one place, but they might not across the board. But they do, as you say, have a something like Skywards or booking your flight through them. They've already got apps in place that kind of deal with a lot of things. To go another step further and integrate that with something like WhatsApp could be something that's on their roadmap or something like that. And you mentioned as well about getting this involved on B2B for SMEs. Have a conversation about it. Let's see what it is that you're trying to do and who you're trying to reach. And if WhatsApp for Business is appropriate for you and is something that you can use to get in contact with your clients more often, let's have that conversation and kind of see if that's your best way of utilizing that for your business. But I'd definitely say if they should be. Yeah.
PK, have you experienced Emirates using SMS or WhatsApp or any form of best practice in the travel customer journey?
So the reason I mentioned Emirates and WhatsApp when I was giving the example was that they're close to customers. They use what customers use. And David actually has emphasized that too, again, saying that, when he came from England, he didn't see it, but here you find that. And I think we'll have a similar scenario if you went to China. You'll find WeChat or, doing the same thing. So these things are things people need to be kind of aware of what their customers are using for. And in this case, this happens to be WhatsApp. Emirates does nudging to me through in-app messaging. They do nudging to me through SMS. And as I say, over time, I believe with the advent of WhatsApp, the way they're coming in and the way they're providing now tools for businesses, you'll see more and more of it. WhatsApp for Business now is a very, very strong platform.
Gentlemen, wrapping up, it's been 45 excellent minutes discussing all things customer journey, technology implementation, operational efficiencies for SMEs. We've touched upon the need to collect your data and really think about your data strategy, the way that you can implement those data insights to increase basket size. We've looked at some case studies from large to small. We've mentioned the availability of different tools. We've also heard from David and PK their personal opinions and experiences of where technology has taken them today and where they're going. It's been an absolute joy. David, PK, are there any final comments that you'd like to wrap up on? How can people contact you if they wish to hear more about your businesses or indeed you as individuals?
Well, the best way to get to me is on Twitter. I'm pretty active on Twitter, PK Gulati, or drop me a line on pk@pk.com.
And from my side, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, but otherwise, d.sullivan at Astound.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of the MEED conference.
Thanks, Elliott. Cheers.